Hello, and welcome to the Big Money Stylist podcast. Okay, so you may be driving down the road. You may be listening to this while you're working out. Usually we do a video of our podcast. However, we are currently in Las Vegas, Nevada. It's actually
Las Vegas.
it's actually my birthday today, Forever 28. And no, just kidding. I'm actually 36 today. My mom told me I wasn't born until 7:30 at night. So Garrett said, technically, we can't celebrate my birthday yet. And we can only celebrate it after 7:30. I'm like, awesome. So we can only celebrate till midnight. 7:30 to midnight is my window. But anyways, we are here today. Usually I have Ani on my show, but Garrett and I are going to be the hosts of the show today. And today's topic is, what did we decide today's topic was?
You get what you tolerate.
You get what you tolerate. And the reason I was like, hey, Garrett, I want you to do this podcast with me. He runs a company called Wake Up Warrior. And there's constantly this kind of struggle of balancing the game of like maybe your communication is not great. And it could be with clients. It could be with staff. But you kind of get what you tolerate. So the only way to learn and grow and figure out more is to speak up or choose to change your situation. So anyways, this is going to apply to hairstylists, but also may apply to many business owners out there.
There you go. And the show is over. All right, listen, here's the deal. Toleration. Let's look at it. What does it mean? Toleration is what you accept to be as true. So the challenge of being a business owner, challenge of being a hairstylist, challenge of being an artist is the fact that most of you have been taught, trained, and educated to tolerate a whole bunch of shit that doesn't make any sense. Like, working 14-hour days, 6 days a week, servicing Grandma Mildred and her curler sets, dealing with Bobby and his gentleman's cut, and dealing with Mary Sue and her two screaming twin boys for that big whopping $42 paycheck with the $5 tip. And you're like, okay, you know what? The hair industry sucks, or I hate doing hair, or maybe what the problem is. Maybe the problem is you've just tolerated bullshit for too long. Right, seriously, like if you take a look at your business is a mirror of you. Let's just consider that your business is a reflection of you. Your bank accounts are a reflection of your skill sets and mindsets as a business owner and as an artist. Not just one, both.
You know what else is true is I think that I've said this before and it like triggered a bunch of people. I'm like, you're just not as good as you think you are. But the problem is you're not setting yourself up to really deliver the potential of what your artwork could be, because you set yourself up in a situation where you're like, oh, I don't really like this person, or I don't really like how they want me to do their color, or I don't really like doing men's cuts, or I don't really like doing this and that. So you set yourself up for failure. Like you think you're amazing, but then you're not doing what you really want to do, and you kind of like take it out on the clients, thinking like, oh, well, they're just not paying me enough, or I've tried with her, she just won't budge. Well, then guess what? She doesn't need to be your client anymore. So you can only, like, when taking on clients that maybe you don't want to work with, or you feel like you're not even offering the work is as amazing as it could be, that's on you. So I think that's so funny because we teach all the time, like, you have to let go of clients in order to gain and kind of rebirth and restart and gain the clients you want. But if you don't correct any of the mistakes you did in the past, you're just going to repeat. You're going to allow clients to treat you the same way. You're going to charge the same prices, and you're not going to have a say in how you deliver your art. And it's so cool because as I've learned and grown throughout my brand, I've held myself to a higher standard, being an educator, being, a mentor for others. Like, I think if I wasn't in this place, I would accept more shit. You know what I mean? Like, I hold myself to a very high standard because I feel like I'm paving a way and leading for a lot of artists. So I have very little tolerance. And I don't think I'm rude or impolite. I think I'm very professional and very much enjoy like the client experience when they sit in my chair. But I'm fortunate enough to where I've pushed myself so much in my career that when clients sit in my chair, they do not dictate how I do their hair, down nothing. I just feel like as the expert and as a professional, I'm like, okay, here's what we're going to do. And my clients trust me, and it took me years to really trust myself. It's not necessarily that you have to build trust with a client, but really, do you trust yourself? Do you trust yourself to say, hey, this is what we're going to do. This is going to give you your best outcome, and kind of put your foot down and build that status with yourself. So it came down to like trusting yourself and not feeling weird and awkward about like, oh, I got to make the client happy. There's always this balance of like making the client happy, but creating conditions in which you win as the artist and can deliver your art to what, like, the most amazing level. So keep in mind that if you're selling yourself short and you don't like who you're working on, you're probably selling yourself short on literally the end result that you can offer.
So let's look up this word tolerate. Literally went to the old dictionary. Here's what it says. One, it says it's a verb, and it says allow the existence, occurrence, or practice of something that one does not necessarily like or agree with without interference. It also continues saying accept or endure something is someone or something unpleasant or disliked with forbearance. Another one, be capable of continued subjection to a drug, toxin, or environmental condition without adverse reactions. All right, literally all three of these definitions here found in the Google, type in the word tolerate, and you will find them there. All of these are discussing about the fact that there is something going on that you are not doing anything about. Something unpleasant or disliked, someone or something that is happening that you are not confronting. So we get into a place where we tolerate shit, and most artists that I have met and worked with over the last 3 years with Danielle inside of Big Money Stylist have faced, they faced many issues when it comes to this topic of toleration, but they really face a problem with tolerating because they don't want to collide with anyone.
Yeah. Ooh.
So I'm going to have Danielle go off on this for a second because consider that your bank account and your business is a reflection of the level of tolerance that you have for behavior and for results, both in your salon and for yourself. And that the reason you tolerate so much bullshit is because of the fact that you hate the idea and even more hate the action of collision.
Well, really quick, I just want to touch base. Like we have quarterly events with a couple hundred stylists that come in and that we train. And our last quarterly event, somebody posed the question like, oh, I love so-and-so. And then somebody said, okay, who's a people pleaser in here? And like 90% of the audience, like raised their hand. And I thought it was interesting because I'm like, God, I think maybe I used to be a people pleaser. And then I was like, you know what? I don't actually think I'm a people pleaser. I think I'm a conflict avoider. So oftentimes in business, I would do things thinking like, oh, I'm just doing it because I'm a people pleaser. But it was because I like avoided that scary conversation of like, hi, I'm no longer offering partial weaves anymore. I'm no longer offering root touch-ups. So I was doing things that were like, I was creating more resistance in myself, and I was creating all the weird energy. So clients would come in for a root touch, and I was like, stupid Sally, she's not even worth my time. But instead of having that conversation and thinking I'm avoiding conflict by saying, hey, I no longer want to work with you, it created all sorts of chaos in my business. And I think that it's, specifically speaking from a woman's perspective, I think that women have a hard time because, I don't know, we connect with our clients. We just like love what we do. And I think we have a hard time with communication and understanding, like we're in the business of making money. Like if you're in business, in any kind of business, you're in the business of making money, and each client is a transaction. And as cold as that sounds, if you don't at some level draw the line and treat it like that, you will suffer. So then you have to ask yourself, okay, in me suffering, who else suffers? Does my husband suffer? Do my children suffer? Like at the cost of me not being able to at the cost of me like avoiding confrontation, who else is that costing me in my life, and who else is that affecting in my life? And it's interesting too, like when I started my brand and I started pushing to each new threshold and each new level, there's this like mommy guilt that comes and all this emotional shit that comes, and I'm constantly like, why am I doing this? But I also feel like by not doing this, I'm costing myself a lot too. So you have to ask yourself, where am I costing myself by not doing the things that I know I need to do? Where am I costing myself where I'm tolerating certain shit in my life?
So we have a little delay, pause in there as we rotate the phones. But here's another word we're going to look up. The word is standard. It defines as a noun, a level or quality or attainment, an idea or thing used as a measure, norm, or model in comparative evaluations. An adjective description is used or accepted as normal or average. And the next one has to do with like an erect tree, which I don't know what that has to do with anything. But anyways, so we have this word standard. We also have this word tolerate. So you tolerate what your standards are. Like, you won't tolerate when someone has performed in a way that is below what your standards are for yourself and for your salon and for your business. And when you let your standards slide, then what you tolerate slides. And this comes back to a value of yourself, right? It's a value that you place on you, or lack of value that you place on you. And then the worst part is you'll have an artist who doesn't put value on herself or himself. They standards are low, so they tolerate high levels of bullshit because the level they tolerate is equal to the standard that they hold. And then inside of that, worse than that, is they then get angry at other artists who have chosen to not tolerate, to raise their standards, and who expect more out of their business and out of their life, and who demand more. Mm-hmm. And yet, there is the big decision. The big decision is, okay, well, what exactly are my standards? And Danielle's had some pretty high standards for our whole relationship. She's had some high standards inside of salon and inside of artists. And
like I meet a standard. Well, I was just saying, like, I think I'm always pushing. Like, I meet a standard, and then I'm like, okay, what's the next standard? Like, that's just my personality, is I'm constantly pushing for the next standard. And I think that's how it should be, because if you end up being stagnant, you're ultimately digressing, especially in hair. Like, if you're mixing up the same formula for 15 years, or you're doing the same weave, or you're doing everything the same, you're ultimately stagnant. So it's funny, we're sitting here in Las Vegas, and I got a suite for my birthday weekend, and there's a club. We're at the Four Seasons, and Mandalay Bay has a club that's like right next to us. So I am pregnant. I'm like almost 7 months pregnant, and I'm like, God, the music is so loud, I cannot sleep. And I'm like thinking, like, am I crazy? Am I pregnant? Like, I just can't sleep. So I get up the next morning. I'm like, my daughters are like, my one daughter was like, oh yeah, I could hear Havana, like clear as day, people cheering. I was like, oh my God. And I was like, normally what I would do is just be like, that sucks. I'm not going to stay here again, whatever. I mean, we're at the Four Seasons, and I'm like, that sucks. And then I was like, you know what? I'm just going to call the front desk and just let them know. I'm not going to be like irritated. I'm not going to be pissed, but I kind of have a high standard, especially when I'm coming to the Four Seasons booking a suite. I'm like, I don't want to, like, we had another night here, and I'm like, I want to be able to sleep. So I just was like, I'm going to call the front desk. And my daughter's like, what are you doing? Don't call him. What are you going to tell him? And I was like, I'm just going to tell him I couldn't sleep. I'm like, so I call the front desk. I'm like, hey, you know what? I just want to let you know this room is beautiful. However, like, we can't sleep. Like, I could clearly hear clubbing music, and I'm like, I don't know if there's anything we can do, or I'm like, it's just, and he was like, oh my God. And it was funny because the manager actually answered, and he's like, let me call you right back and see what we can do. He comes back on. He's like, hey, you know what? We're going to upgrade you to another suite on a different floor. I'm so sorry. And I'm like, okay, yeah, thank you so much. And, you know, just by calling and being like, hey, this is not okay. This is my standard. That's why I booked the Four Seasons. They ended up upgrading us to this huge suite on the next floor up with like an amazing view and everything. And I was like, wow. And I was like, because I expected more, and I had, and I just was like, hey, I'm just going to let him know, give him feedback. Then we got an amazing room. I didn't sleep amazing because I am pregnant, but I didn't hear club music all night. So, and we got a great suite. My kids were excited, and the peace was restored. So oftentimes it's like, what are you missing out on by not holding yourself to a higher standard? And are you not holding yourself to a higher standard because you're afraid of confrontation? So, and I even try to take that account in my own business and my own salon, because I never want a client to feel awkward if like the experience wasn't up to par for them. So I always leave, when they leave, especially a first time client, I'm like, hey, if anything feels weird, you please text us and let us know. Like, we would love to help. And I just always leave that door open for clients, because you're going to get negative feedback when you own a small business, especially in the service industry. Like, it's just how it is. But you can't figure out how to correct those problems if you're not constantly looking for feedback. And so I feel like for like a lot of women, they almost feel uncomfortable if the experience is not up to par, like saying something. So as a business owner, I would recommend, understand that if you get a complaint in your business, like, take it as constructive feedback and be like, oh my God, okay. And don't let it trigger you, and don't be like, oh, well, she's crazy Sally. Like, how can you improve your situation? And that's kind of like off topic, but it's, again, I guess it goes back to what you're willing to tolerate. Like, you can take somebody who has like a negative experience or something that wasn't up to par, and you can be like, well, screw them, and just keep tolerating that. Or you can figure out how to make it better so that that situation doesn't happen in the future. So as a business owner, I would encourage all of you salon owners or individual business owners that if you get any kind of negative feedback whatsoever, how can you flip it to understand like you need to up the standards in your own salon, in your own game, and constantly push that threshold so that you're creating an environment for yourself that you love being in.
We're coming back to the dictionary. Oh, it's a dictionary show. We're going to look up the word collision. You ready? We're going to look this up in the old Wikipedia. A collision is an event in which two or more bodies exert forces on each other in about a relatively short time. Although the most common use of the word collision refers to incidents in which two or more objects collide with great force, the scientific use of the term implies nothing about the magnitude of the force, which takes us down a path of you don't need to know any more of that. But here's the piece. Like collision is like it's a requirement. If you want more cash, you're going to have collision. Period. And we interpret collision as like, violent headbutt. Instead of looking at this like collision is just simply having a conversation. Like having a conversation, what is that conversation about? That conversation is about what you want and the standards that you're holding for yourself in your salon. So for example, give you an example. If you don't hold a standard that spending time with your family and your husband or wife is important while building your salon business, then you may tolerate all kinds of clients who come in that take hours of your time for pennies, being gone from your children and your husband and your spouse because you tolerate it. Like your standard doesn't say, I don't fucking work on my weekends. Your standard doesn't say, I don't work after 6 o'clock. Your standard says, I don't start in the salon until 10. The standard is, I don't work on any client without a minimum income return of A, B, or C. Mm-hmm. Right? Without the standard, you're going to tolerate everything. And yet, in order to change what you're tolerating, you have to actually raise your standard, which means the first collision that begins is not a collision with your client. Yeah. The first collision is with you. And Danielle's going to give us like 2 minutes on this.
A collision with yourself?
Collision with yourself. Talk about it.
I just think in our industry, we're always like held hostage by what we believe is possible. And we say, well, I can't, I'm the primary income earner, or I can't because, I'm going to lose these clients. But honestly, if you set yourself up and you say, hey, these are the days I'm willing to work. I've lived in 4 different states and worked in like 12 different salons, and moving for me got a little bit easier. Building clientele got a little bit easier. And in the beginning, I'd always kind of hustle a little bit to get people on my schedule. When I started to fill up, when I got to that tipping point, I always have like this reference for myself where I have this tipping point where I'm like, oh no, I'm approaching the ledge. I'm approaching that burnout. And when I get to that, that's when I prioritize my time. So in the beginning, if you're building a clientele, there's a little bit more hustle that has to happen. You may go in every now and again on a Saturday. You may be willing to take a later client. You may be willing to take some, like a little bit of more colors, because you can use that opportunity to get more colors in the door. And I actually got a ton of extension referrals out of that. When I get to my tipping point, when I get to my threshold, when I get to that burnout phase, I'm like, okay, let's prioritize. I've reached the maximum amount of days that I want to work. Now I have 30% of my books as clients that I don't really want anymore, or they're just not services that I want to offer anymore. And that's when you have to hold yourself to a higher standard so you don't get locked into what you like created for yourself. And so it's as simple as like being like, okay, I'm no longer offering just colors. I've appreciated you the last couple of years, as a client. However, I'm not offering colors anymore, and kind of sticking to that standard of like, and not only that, here's the new days I'm working. I'm no longer working Saturdays. I'm sorry. You will hear, well, I work. Well, yes, I also work. And you'll find, especially with extensions, I think that a good color, like I'm going to get out of work to go book a good color. I'm going to get out of work to book extensions. And so I think we get in our own heads about, well, I'm going to lose clients, or I have to work weekends, or I have to work late. And you'll hear every now and again clients say, well, I work, because that's the standard that our industry has held, that we work 24/7, all weekends, all the time. So our industry has created that standard, so we can't be mad at clients for saying a comment like, oh, well, I work. Well, because that's the standard our industry has set. So why don't you set a different standard and say, okay, I'm just going to work every other Saturday for the next couple months, and then probably no Saturdays. Or, you know what, on Monday nights is my only night that I'm going to take a 6 p.m. appointment, or whatever it is. But set a new set of rules for yourself, set a new set of standards, and clients will accommodate to whatever those standards are that you set. I think for me, it became less scary because I had to rebuild a clientele so many times in so many different states. And I just I went into it less scared, because I know we have students that are like, have lived in the same place for like 20 years, 15 years, and never, I get how that can be scary, but I just also know in my experience, it's not really that scary if you'll prioritize and set your standards to what you want them to be. And 9 out of 10 times and not even 9 out of 9, like 10 out of 10 times when our students kind of apply the things that we teach them, they're like, oh my God, I did my numbers, and you're right. I'm actually working one less day, or I'm working one less Saturday, but I'm making as much, if not more. So that's the cool thing, is we create stories in our mind about what's possible based on our tolerance and our standards.
So that brings a conclusion for this show. You heard the beeper there in the background. We limited this one to 20 minutes. So part of the reason why Big Money Stylist was built was because it was time for us to offer artists an opportunity to experience what Danielle had experienced, what I had experienced as a business owner, which is opportunity to raise your standards, and inside of that, learn to tolerate at a higher level. Like, tolerate, I should say, at a higher level, because your standards are at a higher level, which means you expect everybody to rise with you. Like, the entire target of being a Big Money Stylist is working 3 days a week, 3 clients a day, and in that place, making $100,000 plus a year or more. And being able to make, and many of our artists are doing $200,000-300,000 a year, and they're working 3 days a week. So this is possible. If you want to learn more, we'd love to have you. Head over to bigmoneystylist.com. We only have one live event available in 2019, tickets are going to be sold out by the time you listen to this. So continue to be part of this, and we look forward to seeing you guys in one of our classes in the future. And whatever that may hold, it appears that 2020 will be your next opportunity. Until then, hope you guys are having a great day. This is Garrett J. White. I am the co-founder of Big Money Stylist with Danielle, and lead trainer inside of that experience. And excited to have you here on the show. We are out. We'll talk to you guys next week.